All right. So you were talking about how bonobos are ignored as irrelevant by some anthropologists and other writers who are wedded to the violent, dominant, male conquering kind of paradigm. And I agree with that. I've criticized. We have a sort of common target in Steven Pinker and Richard Dawkins. I've disputed that neo-Hobbesian vision of human history and prehistory. But what about with sexuality? Because I feel like, you know, my book Sex at Dawn, which you were very kind in writing sort of a blurb for in a way, you know, the argument that we make there is that bonobos are very relevant to human sexuality. But I feel like you sort of skirted around that a little bit in your own writing, where you say, well, yes, bonobos are like this and chimps are like that, and humans are not a promiscuous species, and we're, you know, pair bonding. But what do you do with the fact that, you know, humans have sex when we're not ovulating, when pregnancy isn't possible? And, you know, you mentioned dolphins earlier, clearly not a pair bonding species. How do you frame that in your own mind? Where do you think that science is?
Well, I think bonobos also have sex when they're not ovulating. So bonobos, they have these genital swellings, the females, but they don't correspond exactly with ovulation. And so they have a lot of sex going on when they're not able to get pregnant. So I think, humans, I would never call humans monogamous necessarily. Humans have nuclear families in the sense that man got involved in the caring for offspring. And it's a very flexible system, clearly, because in many societies it's one male, one female, and their children, but in many other societies that's not the arrangement. And there may be many men involved in a family or many women involved in a family. So it's a very flexible arrangement, but men are involved in offspring care, one way or another. And that's not the case in bonobos and chimps. The males do very little. So that's a substantial difference. We have evolved nuclear families. Whether we are monogamous or not, people always ask that. I don't think we can answer that question. We cannot even answer that question for birds. You know, there are certain birds who lifelong stay together, the male and the female. So you could call them monogamous. But we know now from all sorts of research that even in these birds, we can only speak of social monogamy. They don't have. It's not always the male who is the father of the offspring of the birds.
Yeah. Has there ever been research where chimps or bonobos were shown pornography?
Yeah. You mean human pornography? Yeah, probably. But I do remember at some zoos they had trouble getting certain males to copulate with females. I think it was gorillas actually, and then they showed them pornography in the hope that they would learn something from it.
Yeah. Human pornography, or did they film?
I think that was human pornography. It was pretty radical, I think, to do that. Yeah.
Right.
And I don't remember if it worked. You know, so the same thing is done, and this is not pornography. The same thing is done with females who cannot raise their offspring. So females who don't know how to nurse their babies, for example, gorillas or chimps, they show them human women who then nurse their baby in front of them, and that seems to help. That seems to help them. So giving them an example of behavior that they need to show. Yeah.
Well, I wonder, among bonobos and or chimps, when they witness a couple copulating, does that then spread among the group? In other words, are they excited by the sight of other animals having sex? Yeah.
No, I think the reaction of males, usually you're seeing that, is trying to interfere. You know, if the high-ranking males, they try to interfere with it. I've never seen that it facilitates their behavior, so to speak.
Oh, interesting. All right. So it's not like sneezing where you see someone sneeze and then you want to sneeze, or yawning or something like that. Interesting. Yeah, I asked about that because I remember reading some research. I forget the researcher's name. I think she was in Montreal, maybe at McGill or somewhere. And she showed women different images that could be considered erotic. And one of the video clips was of bonobos having sex. And she was measuring genital blood flow in her human subjects.
Oh, yeah.
And she found that, she showed like women with women, men with men, men with women, and then just like an attractive man and a woman walking down a beach, in bathing suits, and then also bonobos having sex. And she wanted to see how these different video clips stimulated genital blood flow. But
the eroticism of the bonobo is really interesting because it is suppressed in our media. Like in the U.S. and Great Britain especially, people are very shy about sex. They're very Puritan, and I noticed that for example, if I show bonobo videos to American audiences or to my classes at Emory University, the people go silent. If I do it in Holland or in France, people become happy. They become animated. They think it's wonderful what they're seeing. But Americans, they become silent. So it's a very different reaction, and I think it explains why sex in bonobos wasn't mentioned for a long time until Frans Lanting and I did our book on the bonobos, because American scientists didn't know what to do with it. It was too explicit for them. And I've heard that the same thing is happening now in Hollywood. Hollywood also always paid more attention to violence than to sex, but now I hear that sex has almost entirely disappeared from the movies. It's less than 2% of movie content is erotic, and it's mostly tongue kissing. That's what it has gone to. They're so shy about it. Whereas the European movies, recently at the Cannes Festival, there were some quite erotic movies. And so Europe and the US are even growing more apart now at the moment on this issue.
How do you feel about that? Being your wife is French, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're Dutch, and you spent a lot of your life in the US. I'm sort of in the opposite side of it. I'm born in the US, but I spent most of my life in Europe, in Spain. Are you comfortable in American culture, given these divergences?
Yeah, so I've learned to adjust to it, and that certain things cannot be mentioned, and without people getting red heads or something. So I've learned that. I think it's very odd, and the thing that bothered me the most of all was their aversion to breastfeeding in public.
Yeah.
So I still remember how I was shocked. I had just arrived in the U.S. and I read in my local newspaper in Wisconsin, I read that a woman had been arrested in the supermarket because she was breastfeeding. And I thought, this cannot be true. This is not possible. You cannot arrest someone for breastfeeding. But that's what had happened. So yeah, that's the thing that bothers me the most of all. It's very odd. And I think when the sexuality of bonobos is ignored for that reason, that is very unfortunate. So, for example, the nature documentaries are almost always about chimpanzees, and very little about bonobos. And when I ask people from the BBC or the NHK who make these documentaries, why don't you do a little bit more on bonobos? They say, well, the bonobos, they don't show the same action. The chimpanzees, they fight, and then there's blood, and that's good for television. But the bonobos have no action. I say, well, there's a lot of erotic action. Well, that's not what they wanted to show.
Yeah.
But that is changing. At the moment, we have several filmmakers, I'm in contact with them, who want to do more on bonobos. And that's partly related to the gender issue and the sex issue. They actually specifically want to show that. So I think it's going to change in the coming years.
It's an interesting point, and in the context of different, this book you've just published, you make a big point of saying, look, a lot of this debate is about people's opinions and philosophical perspectives, But in science, we're looking for objective reality. We're looking for measurable data. But it's interesting because what you just described is a way in which science is distorted, or at least the public perception of science is distorted by the dramatic needs of a filmmaker, right? I don't know if it was you who told me this story, but someone told me a story about being in Congo to help filmmakers who wanted to make, I think it was National Geographic, make a movie about bonobos. And they got all their equipment down there, and they went out and they said, well, when are they going to stop fucking? Was this you?
No.
Whoever it was told me, like, they had flown this whole team to Congo, and they're like, wow, what's happening? They're fucking all the time. And like, when will they stop? And like, well, they don't stop. And like, oh, no, we can't show this. And they wasted all this money.
Yeah, that's clear. That's also how I wrote the book with Frans Lanting. He's a famous photographer, and he went to the Congo to photograph bonobos for National Geographic, and came back with a ton of pictures where indeed a lot of sex was going on, and the National Geographic didn't want it, and so that's how we ended up doing a book on it.
And
that's
a fantastic book.
And we both being Dutchmen, we had no trouble doing that, So.
Yeah, that the Forgotten Ape, right? Is the Bonobo the Forgotten Ape? I've probably given a dozen copies of that book as gifts. It's a beautiful book, large format, great photography. Well, it must be awkward for you sometimes. I mean, I know my experience at dinner parties when people ask me what I do, and I, mention the first book or my PhD, and the conversation just sort of gets either really interesting for people or very awkward for people. I imagine, and in Georgia, you must have that even more. I was in Los Angeles.
Well, we select our friends on how we get along with them. and most of our friends here in the U.S., we have no trouble talking about these issues.
Yeah, they're used to it by now.
They don't get up and leave the table, so to speak. I know.
That's great. Is there infanticide in chimpanzees? Is that an issue? Like, I know with gorillas, when a new alpha male takes over the group, or silverback, there's the danger of infanticide. That's also the case with chimps. Yeah,
chimps do that, and I think the Bonobo Society is specifically designed to prevent that. So bonobos...
Through the promiscuity.
Well... There's several issues. One is that the females have sex with so many males in bonobos, and so often, that there is no way for a male to exclude his own offspring if he wants to be infanticidal. So it's not a very good strategy for males to be infanticidal. And the females are collectively dominant over the males, and so they can control their aggression of the males. So I think Bonobo Society is very much an anti-infanticide. And there are actually no official reports that I know of infanticide in bonobos. There are some reports of attempted infanticide, but not of an actual one. And in chimpanzees we have quite a few reports. Yeah.
So I've always been confused by that mechanism that you're describing, where widespread sexual interaction between males and females leaves the males unwilling to contemplate infanticide because they might be killing some of their own offspring. This presumes that males understand that sex causes babies.
No, it doesn't assume. We actually don't think that animals, whether they're chimps or mice or whatever, that males know about reproduction. But males don't know that they're making babies, so to speak.
Right, but isn't that the assumption there? Like,
no,
there's a lot of sex, therefore how would they know? Why would the widespread sexual activity influence their murderousness?
No, okay. Let's say that you install a simple rule in males, a rule of thumb in their head, that says, be nice to females that you had recent sex with, including their offspring. If that's the rule that males follow, then they're going to be favoring their own offspring because they're going to be nice with females they had recent sex with. And actually for mice, I believe they have done some experiments that show that males have that tendency. Is that if they had recent weeks or months they had sex with a female, they're going to be nicer to her. And I think this is a strategy that many female animals can follow, is that if you have sex with multiple males, then you're excluding these males as dangers for yourself because they're going to be nicer to you. And the males don't need to know anything about offspring and making babies. They don't need to have that knowledge. And that's, I think, what bonobo females maybe are good at, is they have so much sex with so many males that all of them are going to be nice with her when she comes with a baby.
Right. What's the gestation period in bonobos?
It's probably 8 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. So it's a pretty constant, renew those relationships constantly in order to maintain that.
Well, they have a very long interbirth interval of 6 years, 5 to 6 years.
Really?
So a chimp or a bonobo has only maybe 5 or 6 children in her life because there are very long intervals between. Because a female cannot handle more. A female has a baby on her belly, a juvenile on her back, and maybe an older juvenile who follows her. She cannot handle more in the forest than that. And we humans, because we got men involved in offspring care with the nuclear family, we started to reduce the interval. So the reason we have 8 billion people on this earth is because we got men involved in offspring care. And so the interval in hunter-gatherers is, I believe, 3 years, 3 to 4 years. So that's much shorter.
Yeah, interesting. And what's the infant mortality situation in bonobos and chimps?
I don't know much about that.
Yeah, because in hunter-gatherers it's around 40%. It's quite high.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they would be similar to that,
Yeah, cool. So what are you working on next? Do you have something, are you the kind of person who always has, a pipeline going, or do you take a break and just chill out and see if you get inspired?
No, at the moment I'm very much involved in promoting my book. So recently I'm just back from the Netherlands, where I did an enormous amount of interviews on Dutch media. And the book is now a bestseller in the Netherlands. And soon I will go to Germany, to France, to Italy, Spain. So the book is coming out, I think, in at least a dozen languages. And so I need to promote it at the moment. So, and I find it very interesting because I'm sure I'm going to get very different reactions in, let's say, Germany. Germany had just a big scandal at the University of Berlin by a woman speaker who was refused at the university because she was going to explain that there were only 2 sexes. And so the trans community revolted and didn't want her to speak. Even though I think they should have listened to her, who knows what she meant and what she meant to say. I think it's always more interesting to listen to someone like that, even if you disagree, than to exclude them. But anyway, they excluded her, and so that's now becoming a big scandal. And every country gonna have different reactions. I noticed that also in the translations, at least the ones that I can read. I noticed that the reactions are different. The way they translate gender and sex is already different per country,
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking about that, to what extent linguistic considerations shape this debate, right? Like, last night I watched a documentary called What is a Woman? And it's this sort of right-wing guy going around and interviewing doctors and various people and trying to just get them to say, like, okay, what is a woman? How do you define woman? And he gets all these weird answers about a woman is whoever says she's a woman. And he's like, yeah, but what about the body and all that? And it's very hard to talk about because the words are so fluid, sex is often confused with gender, as we outlined at the beginning of this. But I think, you said this woman in Berlin wanted to say there are only 2 sexes. I think that's demonstrably true in mammals. I mean, as you said, there's a very small percentage of intersex, chromosomal anomalies, but generally in mammals you have either, the gametes are either testicles or ovums.
I'm not even sure she was talking about mammals. So she was a biologist, but if she means nature in general, well, it's a sort of blunt statement. There's only two sexes, because there is, of course, a small percentage, and there are species that can move. There are certain fish who start their life as a female and end their life as a male. So it is a complex picture. I think even sex is a complex picture, and then gender is an even more complex picture.
Yeah, definitely.
And I don't see the reason to simplify things. So my book is in that regard was a bit frustrating, because at first I wanted to have a fairly simple message, but it became a much more complex message. So, for example, one of the issues I wanted to address in the book, and I do address, is that people always assume that male dominance is natural and male leadership is natural. And I'm not convinced of that at all. So leadership can be found in all the primates. Female leadership can be found in all of them. All of the primates have female hierarchies and have alpha females. So that's not hard to find. And even in species that are male dominated physically, where the males are physically dominant, which is in many of them, even in those species, the highest ranking female has an enormous amount of power. So I try to explain that power is something else than dominance, physical dominance. And so that was one of the main messages I wanted to give. But again, it complicates matters, because people actually want to hear a simple thing. They want to hear me say male dominance is natural, and that's all they want to hear. But I think the things are never simple.
Yeah. And one of the points that I made in one of the books I wrote was that female dominance in human societies doesn't look like the inverse of male dominance. So it's not easily recognizable, because females don't exert power the same way that males do. It's much more coalitional and subtle, and so you don't necessarily see it. Do you know about the circle? I think it was the Circle of Women in the Iroquois. Do you know about that?
No.
So the Iroquois Nation, a very interesting sort of coalition of tribes in northeast United States. In fact, in some ways, Benjamin Franklin studied them and modeled the structure of the United States government with the three different co-equal branches of government on the way the Iroquois wielded power within their coalition. And one of them was that the men would sit in a circle and discuss whether or not they were going to do something, whether it's go to war or move the camp or whatever. And then there was a circle of women around the men. And the women didn't participate in the debate, but when the debate was resolved, the women had to approve or not approve the decision that the men had made.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So it's they have power, they just wield it differently. They're not as loud, they're not the ones standing up and talking, but in the end they make the decision.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, these I'm reading at the moment a book about the history of the world, which talks a lot about American Indian societies. They were much more complex and much more variable than I'd ever imagined.
Yeah, it's for sure. Speaking of books, I read an interview with you somewhere where you talked about some of your favorite books, and one of them was Primates Memoir by Sapolsky.
Yeah,
I love that book.
Sapolsky is such a fun writer.
Yeah,
so
it really is.
I'm always a bit jealous of Americans who write in English, because they have such a. Because I write in English, but for me it's my second language, so I'm always a bit jealous of how easily they express themselves.
Yeah. Well, you
have that also. You have that also in your book.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, he's such a fun guy to read. I met him once, actually. I was speaking at a conference in Mexico, and he was there with David Buss and Helen Fisher and Richard Dawkins. It was a really interesting group of people. and Deepak Chopra also was there. And the main event was Dawkins and Chopra debating,
if God exists or something.
something like that.
You can talk a long time about that,
It was pretty crazy, yeah.
I think I've been to one of those conferences at Chiapa or something. It's a festival, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like a TED thing, but in Mexico.
Yeah, I've been there too,
Yeah, it's fun. Well, listen, thank you. I figure we should probably end before the technology fails us again. I feel like there's a sword hanging over our heads here. Thank you very much for your time and for writing this book, for wading into these dangerous waters. I look forward. Do you have any plans to write a memoir? I know you include some personal things in most of your books, but
yeah, maybe I should do that. My life has not been very eventful. I don't have 5 marriages and a murdered child or something like that.
Well,
no.
These days, I saw in the book you said I think you were 22 or 21 when you were married, and that's the same age my parents married, and they stayed together their whole lives.
Yeah.
And these days that kind of accomplishment is noteworthy. Maybe write about how you did that.
Oh yeah, the success of my marriage. Yeah. I think it's pretty boring, but okay, we can try that.
Yeah, give it a try.
Okay, good seeing you then.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm going to stop this here, and